Welcome to today's class where we're going to be making this lovely little zippered pouch with tab ends and using faux leather in the class today to give you some tips for that. So this is the one we're making actually in the class. Here it is in a couple of other colours. This one's got a handmade badge on. This is a new one I've made recently as well. Love these fabrics. And then if you just wanted to do it in one complete piece of fabric, not split into two, there we go. So gather all your things together and let's get started. Okay, these are a few extra tools that I've used today that might make things easier if you have them. If not, don't worry. I've used a little this is a 4.5-inch square rule. It's great for doing your box corners. Masking tape, if you're using faux leather, this can help making your stitching easier. Zippered 1/4-inch quilting tape. This is it's good for adding zips. I don't actually use it in the video, but if you like to use it for adding your zips, I show you how to make it easier to do it without it if you haven't got that. I have used a fabric glue pen. Again, it's not essential, it's just handy to have. Tweezers, I wouldn't be without these. I use these for everything. This helps sewing your seams, and with the masking tape it just helps with everything. I've used just a regular biro for just marking within my seam allowances, but you could use a friction pen, which is a disappearing marker, or chalk or something like that. And I've used my zipper foot. Okay, so what you're going to need to make your pouch. Now in the video we're doing a faux leather base, but you could also do a cotton base, or you could do it all in one colour. Choice is yours. So in the video I'm going to do a faux leather. Anyway, so for fabric A, which is this section, you're going to need 2 pieces, and this is all height by width, so 4.5 by 12 inches. So you'll need 2 of those. You'll need fabric B, which is the faux leather today, and you'll need 2 of those, and that's 3.5 tall by 12 inches wide. And then you'll need fabric C, which is your lining, and you'll need 2 of those, 7.5 inches tall by 12 inches wide. Now if you just want to make your pouch in one fabric colour rather than split into 2, then for your outside, instead of doing these 2, then cut 2 pieces for the outside again in 7.5 by 12. So you'd have 2 for fabric A and 2 for fabric C. 2 outers, 2 linings. So you would also need 2 tabs. These are for your zipper ends. So 2 pieces, approximately 1.5 inches by 2 inches. You can use scrap fabric for those. You can use faux leather, anything you want really. Then for your interfacings and waddings, now you need interfacing. I've used cotton woven interfacing on the back of these. So I much prefer cotton woven to the non-woven. It makes it feel more luxurious, gives a nicer look. So you'll need 2 pieces to go on the back of fabric 8, just do them the same size. And you'll need 2 pieces to go on your lining, the same size as fabric C. For your cotton woven, you can use a non-woven medium weight if you want to. These are all iron-on. If you're using a fabric for fabric B, you'll need 2 pieces behind there as well. I'm using faux leather today, so I've not put any of the cotton interfacing on. Now to give you that more luxurious feel, more shop but more expensive feel, rather than just putting interfacing on, I'm putting wadding on as well. Now you could just use wadding on its own, but I like to use them both together and it gives a much more professional finish. So but I'm cutting the wadding slightly smaller so that it's not in your seam allowance. So you need 2 wadding A. These are going to go behind fabric A. So cut 2 pieces, 4 inch tall by 11 inches wide. So basically by the seam allowance, smaller. And then for fabric B, I'm cutting those. These are a little bit different size, so it's by your seam allowance, smaller on the sides. And then I've got two different seam allowances here. I've got a 1/4 inch here and a 1/2 inch here. So these are 2 3/4 inches tall by 11 inches wide. So you'll need 2 of those on whichever you're doing, whether you're doing cotton or whether you're doing faux leather. And then we don't need any wadding for the inside. You don't need any wadding for your tab pieces either. So that's all the pieces that you need to cut out. So then you need to just add your interfacing, your iron-on interfacing, add that onto fabric A, fabric C, and fabric B. If you're using a cotton or a canvas or something like that, you might want to put your interfacing behind that. So, but if you're doing it just like I am, put your interfacing on, iron it on, fabric A and fabric C, and then iron on your wadding on top of that. So you're going to put your wadding directly on top of that, glue side down, and then you're going to iron that on as well. Put a piece of fabric, a cotton, just an extra piece of quilting cotton or something over it, just to help protect your iron from this, and iron from this side and press on your wadding. I would recommend that you don't really use steam for any of these because you don't want to shrink anything. I didn't need to use any steam for any of mine. So you'll want to put your wadding onto A. Now, ironing wadding onto back of faux leather, you can do it because it has like a woven fabric backing. What you need to do is just put your wadding glue side down onto your faux leather on the back, cover it with a piece of quilting cotton or an ironing cloth, and then press, no steam, and then just press it as you go along. Don't iron it, just press for a few seconds in each place, and then pull it back and check. You don't want to leave it too long because obviously it's got faux leather and you don't want to be melting anything or making it bubble on the other side, but you can quite easily press it on. Now on these you need to press it so that you've got a 1/4 inch seam along the top and 1/2 inch seam along the bottom. There'll be 1/2 inch seam at each side, but where we're joining the two pieces together here, I'm using a 1/4 inch, and a 1/4 inch for the zip, and then 1/2 inch around the outside. So if you make sure that you leave, when you attach it, you've got a 1/4 inch at the top and 1/2 inch at the bottom. Okay, so you also need a zip. If you're using zip on a roll like I am, where you're just cutting it off when the zip comes by the meter, make sure you put your pull on and cut that 10 3/4 inches long. Your zip needs to be, so if you're changing the size, this is really easy to change the size of. If you're, whatever size you're doing, you want to make your zip shorter by the seam allowance plus a bit. So this is 12 inches wide, so you would think you do your zip 11 inches wide. That allows for 1/2 inch here, but I like to allow another 1/4 inch, just to 100% make sure that you don't catch it in your seam allowance, and it makes it a little bit easier to get past when you're sewing it. So your seam allowance plus a bit. So I've done mine 10 3/4. If you just want to use a regular dress zip, you can do that. If you use a 12 inch one and then cut it down to 10 3/4 inches long, is easy enough to do, and then you can use just a regular dress zip as well. Now I'm going to use just a regular size, because we're using faux leather, I'm using a regular 80-12 universal needle. This is just a multi-pack, so you've got 70, 80, 90 and 100. I'm just going to use 80 because this is not a heavy faux leather. This is like the stretchy type faux leather that you would get that you'd buy for if you were making leather pants or a skirt or something like that. It's quite a soft faux leather. If you're using a faux leather that's a bit heavier duty, you might want to use a size 90 needle instead. But you'll only need to, if it's a brand new needle, if you put a brand new needle in, you'll probably be all right with an 80. because we're not doing a lot of layers of faux leather. You want a coordinating thread and a coordinating bobbin thread. So I've got a brown to match that and a coppery colour to match the outside. If you've got any quilter's 1/4 inch tape, that's handy, but you know, for helping putting the zip in, but you don't have to have that. You could just use some clips or some pins, plus your regular toolkit. So once you've gathered all that together and you've pressed all your interfacings on, meet me back here. Okay, so one of the first things you want to do once you've ironed on all your interfacings, so there's all mine. Now you can see that the wadding is ironed over the top of the interfacing, the iron-on interfacing. So one of the first things you want to do once you've done that is find the centres on everything and mark your centres. Just makes it a little bit easier. So all you need to do that is just fold your fabric in half and then just put a little snip or a little pen mark top and bottom. Do that within your seam allowance. So for the top and the bottom, just do it a tiny little bit, just enough you can see there, just shows it marked. So do it on all your pieces on the long edges, and then you also want to do it on your zipper. Now you can either mark it with chalk, or I've just put a tiny little snip in mine. Again, just fold your zip in half. You obviously can't fold it completely because it's got the zipper. And I've just put a couple of little snips. Now when you snip into a zip, and just show you here, you can see there's the weave changes. There's an extra line of weaving. You don't want to snip past that. And you're going to sew your zip in with roughly a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so you don't want to go any further. So you've got, you don't want to go past this line here because of the way they're woven, so snip it. If you're using a stripy zip, like you might have seen I've used before, where I used a pink one and it's pink and white stripes all going down that way, don't snip into those because they will fray and come apart. Just put a mark on those, don't snip into them. They are woven differently and they don't have this like this extra woven layer here to stop it fraying. But all your other zips should be fine, but those stripy ones especially, you don't want to be snipping into them at all. Okay, so once you've done that, we'll start joining things together. So once you've done that, we'll get started. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is make our tabs. So we've got 2 tabs, one for each end of the zip. So for your tabs, we're just going to fold them short edge to short edge. Fold them in half that way. I'm just going to finger press this. Open that back out and then fold your sides to the centre. Both sides to the centre. You can press this with an iron if you want to do. And then just going to fold it in half again, like when you're making a bag strap. Okay, so do that with both pieces. Okay, once you've done that, you want to get your zip. Now, if you've got a glue pen, a fabric glue stick pen, or if you've got some glue, this will just make this easier. I'm just going to use the glue stick for now. So if you put a bit of your glue stick on and then pop the end of your zip right up to the fold and fold that down. You want it right up to the fold and then press that down. That will stick that in place. It's a lot easier than trying to hold it in place with pins or clips while you're sewing. And then I'm just going to do the same at the other end. Just a bit of my glue stick. You want to put the edge of your zip right up to the fold and then just fold that over and stick it down. And then we're just going to glue that in place. And now we're just going to sew that in place. Now I'm going to use about a 3mm stitch length for that. If you wanted to put faux leather tabs on here, like rather than cotton like these. I haven't done wider pieces. All I've done is a 1 inch piece. You don't need to do the folding. You can just cut. This is 1/2 inch. This is 1/2 inch. So you can just cut a piece 1 inch, fold it in half, again glue it on, and then just stitch it in place on here. If your faux leather, say, has a white edge in, and you don't want to see that white edge, you can just get a Sharpie marker to match the colour and colour along that white edge before you sew it down. You only need it along these edges. You don't need to bother at the sides. Just colour, like this one with the black, I've just put a black Sharpie marker along the edge because it had a white backing on the back of the faux leather, and I didn't want to see that, so I just ran a Sharpie along it. So you'd only need 1 inch piece if you were doing them in faux leather. That's a good way, again, to use up all your scraps of faux leather. You don't need to put all the folds in them. They can be raw edge. Okay, so I'm going, and then stitch with at least a 3.5 mil stitch length. I like to go 3.5 to 4 at least on faux leather. Right, but on these I'm just going to do a 3. I think I'm just going to do a 3 mil stitch length, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. You don't need to backstitch, just straight across. And then if you just bring your zipper round, you don't need to cut that thread, and then you can just go straight onto the next one. Okay, so we didn't need to backstitch there because we're just going to cut them apart and then just trim them to the size of the zip. These are going to be sewn into the seam of your bag, so just trim them ends, and then that's your zip. That's your zip, all ready to go. Okay, so next get a piece of fabric A and a piece of fabric B. So that's my faux leather and my pattern fabric. Make sure if your fabric is directional, it's pointing in the right direction. I'm just going to turn these over to show on the back of the bottom piece. I'm doing 1/4 inch along the top and 1/2 inch along the bottom. So make sure that your 1/4 inch seam allowance here, where you've left your wadding out of the seam allowance, the 1/4 inch is the one that's next to your fabric A, your top piece, because you want the wider one at the bottom. You could do all your seam allowances exactly the same. You could do 1/4 inch around the outside, but again, I find it easier to do it this way. Okay, so I'm just going to fold the bottom fabric B up onto fabric A, so that your centre marks line up, and then just clip that into place, or pin it, whichever you choose to use. And then we're just going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to leave my seam allowance bigger, because when you're sewing faux leather, you don't want a tiny little seam allowance, because your faux leather could perforate. And it looks a lot better if it's sewn with a bigger stitch. It holds better with a bigger stitch. So I'm going to sew my seams with a 3 mil, and then I'm going to sew my top stitch with a 4 mil. Okay, so this is at 3 mil now, so I'm just going to do it at 1/4 inch. You can backstitch or not at the end, the choice is yours. I like to backstitch there, but that's personal choice. Okay, and then you're going to fold and press that down. Fold the bottom panel down. Press it down so your seam allowance will be pointing towards the bottom. That's why we've sewn it that way, this onto there, and then your seam allowance is pointing towards the bottom, and we're going to top stitch it on the faux leather. Now, if you've got a Teflon foot, that would be handy to use now. If you're just doing it in cotton, that doesn't matter, just use your regular foot. If you've got a Teflon foot, that would be handy to use now, or a non-stick foot if you haven't got that. If you've got any masking tape or washi tape, I'll do that and show you how that works. Now I've just got some regular masking tape here. So if you haven't got a non-stick foot, put it so it lines up with the top edge of your faux leather. You want it to be right so that you sew in a straight line. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that lines up with the fold. Obviously, it being faux leather, I can't really press that down. If you were doing cotton, just press that seam now. If you were doing cotton. But if you're doing faux leather, I was asked to show how to do it with faux leather. So just put you don't have to press it down hard or anything. Okay, now I'm going to set my stitch length to 4mm. And then I'm just going to sew on that at 1/8 of an inch. I've got a mark on my foot. I've marked it with a marker pen, so it's 1/8 of an inch away from the needle. And I'm just going to sew straight across that. The reason we do this is because otherwise, if you're just using a metal foot, if you haven't got a non-stick foot, it will stick to the faux leather. And you'll get some stitches that are tiny, some are big, because it won't be able to move along, especially when the weather's warm. So roughly 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so when we've done that, then you should just be able to peel. It would be better if I had back stitch there. Just peel this should peel off against your stitching. You might have to go in with a pair of tweezers and pull out any stray bits afterwards. I would recommend back stitching there. I should have done that. I'm pulling my stitches there. There we go. Can you see? Pull that slowly. All the tape that's under them stitches is actually pulling out as well. But if it doesn't, just take your time so you don't stretch your stitches. But any that doesn't pull out, you can just go in with a pair of tweezers and get that out. Okay, let's get that last bit there. And there we go. That's your top stitch line without having to use a non-stick foot. So just going to repeat that on your other piece. Okay, so just to show you that that wasn't a fluke, this is the next one. 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to back stitch this time. Okay, so that shouldn't pull my stitches apart this time. There we go. I'll use the bigger side first. There we go. Just take your time so you don't damage your stitches. Okay. Okay, now I'm just going to grab a pair of tweezers, and then you can just grab these extra bits. Okay, so there you go. That just shows if there's bits left over, just get your tweezers, good pointy tweezers. I got a pack of about 4 or 5 of these off Amazon for about £5, so they're definitely worth investing in. But that just shows how you can do your top stitch on your faux leather without a non-stick foot. Obviously, if you've got a non-stick foot or a Teflon foot, you don't need to do any of that. You can just stitch it, but still stick to about a nice 4mm stitch length. Looks really nice and neat for your top stitch. Okay, so now we're going to add our zip. So you need to decide which way around you want your zip, which end you want your zip pull. Everybody's different, I think. For this bag I'm doing here, it doesn't matter because both sides are exactly the same. So it doesn't really matter which end I put the zip because it's going to be the same at both ends. Now, you want to have one of your panels right side up, and then you're going to put your zip right side down. Now, we can use 1/4 inch quilting tape to hold that in place. Now, if you haven't got this, you can just put your tape across, stick it on, and it makes it a lot easier. But if you haven't got that, and you want to make it easier to put a zip in than you might find it normally, I would first put my zipper foot on. Okay, so that's my zipper foot on, and then you want to get some pins or clips. So I'm just going to get a couple of clips. I'm just going to open my zip up so that the zip pulls out the way. Now line up your centre mark on your zip with your centre mark on your panel and clip that in place. Okay, clip it all the way along. Okay, so we're going to sew the zip. We're going to do 2 lines basically. So you would normally sew this with about a quarter of an inch seam allowance. But the first time we sew it, we're going to sew it with 1/8 of an inch. So we'll sew it with 1/8 of an inch first, and then we'll add the line in, and then sew it at a quarter of an inch. But we're going to if we sew it at 1/8 of an inch on here first, that will stop the zip slipping when you put the lining on, so you're more likely to get it in a straight line without any curves and waves, because you're only sewing it onto one piece. You've not got it sandwiched between the lining, so you can see what you're doing. Okay, so just take that one off. So roughly at 1/8 of an inch inside your seam allowance. It can just be just less than the 1/4 of an inch, as long as it's a bit further over than your seam allowance. Okay, I'm leaving it on the 4mm stitch length, because this I'm going to sew it again in a minute, and I'll turn it down, and then just keep taking your clips off, hold it in place as you sew it down. You can use your tweezers so you're not likely to sew your fingers. Tweezers are invaluable in my opinion. Everybody needs these. Doesn't have to be straight, a straight line. As long as your zip says straight against here, it doesn't matter if you're stitching straight, as long as it's within your seam allowance. Now I'm just going to do my zip up there, and it's out of my way while I do this last bit. Okay. Now we don't really need to backstitch that, so I'm just going to open that up again. So now we're going to sew the lining over the top of that. So get one of your fabric B pieces, which is your lining, and you're going to put that face down on top of here. Just trim that. So line up your centre mark with your centre mark here, so that it's all centred, and clip that. So I would add a few more clips this time, and now we're going to sew at about a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's roughly It's probably a bit less than the width of your zipper foot. But that's what I'm just going to do. I think because I'm doing it on a bigger zip, a size 5 zip, I'm just going to do the width, roughly the width of my zipper foot. Should be about right. So I'm just going to back stitch at the end. Now, I'm still going to use my tweezers so it doesn't push the fabric. Hold it down. Keep using something to hold it down, then it doesn't push your fabric. And then it doesn't end up much longer at this end. And just take your time if you struggle with zips. Now once you get near the zip, I'm down there, I'm just going to open that up. You can lift your foot. If you struggle to get the zip past, just turn it to the side and it should go past then. Put it back down and then just continue on. Make sure everything's lined up. And then I'm going to back stitch at the end. Okay, so then when we should open that up, fold the lining back, we should have a nice straight zip. Okay, so now you just want to press, go to your iron and press those in place. Press it from the back as well. Make sure everything lines up nice and neat and you get a nice neat fold here. And then we'll attach the other one. You're going to attach the other one the same way, and then we'll top stitch. Okay, so imagine I've just pressed that now. So get your next piece. So get your next panel and have it right side up, and then get the one that you've just made. Imagine I've just pressed that and put that one right side down. So you've got your two right sides together and your lining will be showing up here. And then line up your centre marks there and clip all that into place. Then my zip's at this end so it's out my way when I start. Okay, and we're just going to sew that in inside your seam allowance, so at about 1/8 of an inch, just like you did before. Okay, so that's that stitched on, and then you want to get your next lining piece, your next fabric C piece. Put that face down on top, so it's sandwiched, your zip sandwiched in between. Line up your centre marks. Clip that all the way down like you did before, and then sew it at 1/4 of an inch all the way down, back stitching at each end on that one. I'll just trim all those threads. Okay, so that when you open it out now, your two lining pieces will be on this side and your two outer panels on that side. Now I'm just going to close that up. So what you want to do now, if you haven't already, is press these seams from your zip. So you want to press them on the outside and the inside. Try and make sure on this bit that your inner fabric, your lining fabric, doesn't roll to the outside. It's more better if that rolls to the inside a little bit. So I'm just going to give that a press. Okay, so I've pressed those. Now just be careful when you're pressing that you don't catch your faux leather. Put a piece of cotton or something over it to make sure that you don't catch that faux leather with your iron, because it will stick to it if you do. So now we're just going to, just like you top stitched here, we're just going to top stitch on the fabric. If you've used faux leather here, you can do exactly the same thing. You can use your masking tape or you can use your non-stick foot. So I'm going to do, as I've used a 4mm stitch length here, I'm going to use a 4mm stitch length here as well. I'm going to leave my zipper foot on while I do this. Okay. I find on your zipper foot, let me just take this off and show you to make it easy to line it up. This bit of your zipper foot sticks out at the back, so I line the edge of my fabric up, so this edge here I line up with this edge of the fabric, and the needles obviously going in and out there through the hole, so the distance between there and there is the distance between my edge and my stitching, and that makes it a lot easier to keep a straight line if you struggle to keep a straight line. Okay, so again, just line up the edge with the fabric. I'm at 4mm stitch length. I'm just going to do a couple of back stitches there. I'm just keeping all this flat. If you keep your hands so it stretches out a little bit, and as you stitch along, go slow and keep the edge of your foot, the back of the edge of your zipper foot lined up with the folded edge here. Take your time, and as long as you do that, you should get a perfectly straight line. And even if you've sewn this on a bit wavy, your top stitch line will follow the edge of this, so you'll get the same wavy line as the wavy line here, which should make it look straighter, if you know what I mean. It'll follow the line. Just keep it on that straight edge. Go slow, and you don't go off it. Okay, and then when I get to the end, I might just do one back stitch there, and then leave your needle down, turn, put your needle up, stretch that thread out a bit there, and then you can just go straight over to this side, put your foot down, do a couple of back stitches, and then just continue on. Do the same down that side. Okay, so there we go. That's all nicely top stitched. So if you like to cut your corners out now when it's flat, you need to do that. So we'll do that. Do them separately from your lining. So do all the outer ones and then do all the lining ones. Don't try and do both together. But what I like to do is I like to sew them together first, and then I'll box my corners afterwards. I'll put a little video in here, a link to a video showing how different ways to do box corners for whatever is your preferential way to do it. So I like to do it afterwards. So open your zip now. Now if you wanted to put a tab in at the end, now I prefer my zip pouches without a little pull tab in. Some people like at the zip end and on the other side sometimes a little tab. If you want to do that, you're going to put it in now. You will just stitch it into place pointing inwards now. I'm not going to do one today because I prefer mine, like I say, without it. I don't feel I miss it when there's not one there. Okay, so now you're going to bring your right sides together, and then you're going to bring your lining sides together, and we're going to clip and pin it together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to line up our seams. We're going to line them up on the zipper. Now you push your tab towards the lining, not towards the outer, so that end of the zip tab will go towards the lining. And then I'm going to pin these. If it's faux leather, you obviously can't pin it, you need to clip it, but this section's cotton, so I like to pin this. It's less likely to slip then. And I'm going to turn it around and do the same with the other side. So you can see that they're both lined up. pin it. I'm going to pin it either side on the lining and the outer. And then the next things you want to make sure are lined up are your joins, where your fabric joins. So I like to put it together and roll it together so that's all lined up. And I'm going to pin that on the cotton side. Can't pin it on the faux leather side because it'll leave permanent holes, but you can pin it on the cotton side. So then turn that round and pin this one as well. You can clip it if you like. It's less likely to slip with pins. And then all the rest, anywhere else, I'm just going to clip it into place. Okay, so that's enough clips for me. Now, we also want to leave a turning gap in your lining. So I'm just using a regular biro. And I just leave a turning gap roughly about the width of my hand. Make sure your lines are within your seam allowance, and we're going to use those as a guide. So we're going to start stitching here, stitch all the way around and finish stitching here. So I'll just show you how to do that so that you can get a nice neat turning gap. Okay, now if you start at your line, okay, so if you start at your where you've just marked it, now we're doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the edge. This is my 1/2 inch mark here. Okay, and then put your needle down and then just turn everything towards the bottom and then stitch down towards the bottom. Ooh, I'm just going to reduce my stitch length back down to my normal length. Okay, and then stitch back up to where you started and then turn. This makes it, there's a lot less stress on the turning gap when we do this. Okay, and then stitch all the way around. Leave your needle down on the corners. If you need to, use your tweezers to help guide things under. Now when you get to this is quite bulky here. You can use your bulky seam aid to help you get over that if you've got one. If not, roll up a bit of cardboard and put it behind your foot. Okay, so as that starts to tilt up, I'm now going to put that behind and it levels your foot out. Now, if you want to make 100% sure you don't stitch on your tab, then you can always mark a line. I'll just do one on this side now at the end of the tab so you know where not to stitch. So you stitch past the end. Okay, now I've gone right past the edge there. Now I'm just going to bring my my seam allowance. I'm just bringing it down just a little bit. That way, if the seam allowance on my lining will be bigger than it will be on my outer fabric. So I'm just bringing it down just a little bit. That way your seam allowance won't be baggy. And then just keep going. Try not to hit your pin. Just hand crank that. Turn. See, I'm just slightly under the 1/2 inch. You can still do it on the 1/2 inch. It just means it does help your lining sit in a little tighter. Okay, so I'm just working my way back over slightly because the seam allowance needs to be the same here. So again, I'm going to need to put the bulky seam aid in underneath, or roll up a piece of cardboard and put that under the back, thin card, just to level your foot out. Don't go past the line you've drawn. And then if necessary, if you need to, you can bring it round to the front so that as it goes, as your foot starts to tip down, it keeps it level. Okay. Okay, and then turn. It's pushed it out of shape a bit, so I'm just making sure I'm still on the line. And then when you get to your other line, stop, leave your needle down, turn, and then stitch off the bottom. I would put a couple of back stitches in. Okay, then that's stitched all the way around. Okay, so now I'm going to draw my corners on using this little square ruler. We're doing 1.5 inch corners. Here, you can make them bigger if you want, but you just bear in mind, if you make them any bigger, you'll lose height here and your faux leather will disappear. So you could make them smaller and it'll be a bit taller here. But I'm going to do them at 1.5. That way, the finished measurement is double that, so you'll have a 3 inch base across the bottom. I'm not going to show you how to do these. I'm just going to put a little video link in. There'll be a link on the video, and then there'll be a link in the description box below to a video showing you how to do box corners. I think 3 different ways, so depending on which way you like to do it. So if you need that help on how to do box corners, go off and watch that, and then come back to here when you're finished, and then we'll carry on. Okay, just remember when you're boxing your corner, if you're doing it on faux leather, make sure you use your longer stitch length again, between 3 and 4 mil stitch length. Okay, so that's all my corners boxed. Now a tip on your lining when you box your corners, if you do another stitch line to the inside of the stitch line that you've already done on your box corners, that'll help make your lining not baggy as well, less baggy as well. Because it makes it slightly smaller. I'm also just around here, around the bulk where the zip is, I'm just going to trim a little bit out. I'm leaving a little bit of seam allowance, but I'm just trimming a bit of the bulk out. It'll help it look a bit neater there. I'm not too worried about trimming any of my other seams. I just want a little bit trimmed out from the ends for when you turn it through. Okay, so moment of truth. So we're just going to turn it all through now. And this is where I mean before. So you've got no stress. You shouldn't have much stress here. It's less likely, stitches are less likely to break or start to come undone. So we'll just turn all that through. So through to the lining and then through to the outside. So there you go, if you've got your lining up right, that's not too bad. Okay, push your ends of your zips out and you should have a little gap there because you've stitched past it and not through it. Same at this end, look. So you've got a little gap. Push all your points out. Now you can see, because I've done the lining corners a little bit smaller, and I stitched the stitched the seam allowance on the sides just ever so slightly bigger, as long as your seam allowance at the top matches. Okay, then your lining, as you can see, won't be baggy at all. Now, all you need to do now is sew up your turning gap. So you can either take it to your machine, just fold that in. It should automatically, when you pull on the seams, that should automatically turn to the inside where you've stitched it, like that. And then you can just clip that and then stitch that quite close to the edge, back stitching at each edge, or you can hand sew it or glue it and then hand sew it, or just glue it if it's for yourself. But if you're selling it or giving it as a gift, I would recommend sewing it up. I like to hand sew it so it's an invisible stitch. I'll add a link up here and I'll put the link in the description box down below to the little video on a close-up on how to do that hand sewing. It literally only takes 5 minutes, and it's really easy to do. And then when you push your line into the inside, you can't actually see any stitching, whereas when you do it on your machine, you get a little ridge. If you're not bothered about that, all well and good. But if you want an invisible stitch, go to that video and it'll show you how to do it. So there we go. There's your pouch all finished. So I hope you enjoy making that. So if you go over and join our Woolly Elephant Facebook group, you can then share your pictures of your makes with everybody else for some inspiration. I'd love to see the fabrics that you make yours in. Thanks for watching.